Something to think on. The red pill movement, it started with the Matrix. It was a period of awakening where people figured out, hey, the world is like you're slaves to the system, and we're not slaves to the system, but let's try to understand the Matrix in this context. We are in a society with rules that are written. These are laws. You break them, you go to jail. There is a fine, something attached to it. But they're societal mores. These change very slowly. So you have conservatives and you have liberals. Conservatives want to maintain these mores. Liberals are always challenging the status quo. That's the same way it's happened in Canada, right? So status quo, change. And I'm always in the middle. I think change should happen over time. But let's get back to what the red pill is. The red pill was supposed to say to people, hey, challenge the status quo, understand. But first, before you even challenge it, you have to understand the status quo. And you have to understand that you're in a system that does not necessarily benefit you. And a lot of people go from the red pill to the black pill where they give up and they end up into this victim lifestyle. A lot of times what happens, and I notice this with a lot of black folks that I talk to, and as a black man, it's weird because coming from Jamaica where you actually see black people in power and all of that stuff, you still have a little issue where, a lot of the wealth is trapped within, the lighter hues and all of that stuff. But you see a way in which you can climb and you can achieve, and you've seen it in other people who have achieved. So I think normally someone who is in the upper middle class of Jamaica going to a foreign country is naturally red pilled. That's my opinion on it. And to a lot of people that I meet, one of the things that I figured out is the red pill movement was generally in for white males, and I think it was a bit different than it is for black males. And I get it. Let me talk a little bit about how it is for white males. I always remember, back in the 90s being in Jamaica, and you had Newt Gingrich around, Bill Clinton was president at that time, and he spoke of the angry white men, and he spoke that they're saying they're taking away everything, the foreigners are coming in, and the Republicans need to do something about it. That was an awakening for them that, hey, globalism, that was a big term at the time, was not good for them. Factories were being shuttered, going to China, all of that stuff. So they saw it and they became red pilled based on that. In the black community, I think it's let's go on to what happened later. Later, the red pill movement took a different turn. I think it kind of focused on nerds. People who were a bit more socially awkward who were looking at and saying, hey, here's the whole idea of incelology with the chads and, the women or the roasties going after the chads. And how is it that you could level the dating market field that a socially awkward, not so attractive guy could get a pretty girl? And that I felt like the red pill took on that. And then it had some other racist tones where it was bringing back some of that, stuff where it was like, ethnostates and those type of words and all of that were coming in. But let's move away from that, because I think that's the rabbit hole that you don't want to go down to. So let's talk about the red pill movement for black men. So one of the things that I think with the red pill movement is you have to look at a truth which is something that is hard to embrace and hard to understand. The truth for Neo was that he was a part of the Matrix, and the Matrix really was the fact that the entire Matrix was in his mind, and his body was trapped in a capsule, and so were every other body, and they're all just dreaming. And I think the red pill for a lot of black young men and older men also is something they don't want to swallow, and that is the playing field is almost level. Meaning that a young man born, whether he's black, white, whatever color he is, he has the opportunity to create the next Apple, the next Microsoft, the next Google. Anyone has. There's no color to it. And that red pill is something that I think is hard to swallow, because there's always this discussion of slavery or the fact that, we can't make it because there are barriers, redlining. But the real red pill is that you can make it. You can do it. And it's something that can be done. And let's talk a little bit about that. Let's look at one guy. I like to talk about Robert F. Smith. Look at him. Black guy. Look at it. He came from two parents, both were PhDs. They were teachers. He came from good stock. He went through college. He did what he did. He is in now venture capitalism. He's worth, last time I checked, about $5 billion. Now, Robert F. Smith did not find a barrier to stop him from getting to 5.2 billion. So what stops us from getting to 5.2 billion? Now we are like, most of us will never get to 5 million, much less 5.2 billion. But he shows you that it is possible. And he is no different than any other black guy, other than the fact that he probably came from 2 PhD parents. He probably grew up upper middle class. And as I said, I find people who are upper middle class are naturally red pill because they already see that there's no barriers to it. So they generally are the ones who can make it. And I think that's kind of like where Bill Gates and Paul Allen came from. Upper middle class folks, they kind of found out, hey, there's more that we can do, and they didn't see barriers. What I wanted to us to look at is when we start to talk about slavery, when we start to talk about the barriers that we have, what we do is deny ourselves the opportunity to grow. There are limitations. Everyone has limitations. I can't draw to save my life. I would be a horrible sculptor and that. Now, when it comes to finance, I am good at finance, and I've spent several years working in a finance industry. That's my bread and butter. But what I'm saying is, for each of us, it's something to look at. What is your red pill? And if your red pill is the system is unfair and it's against us and I can't make it because your red pill is to figure out that the system is not against you. It is your brain is your limitation. You are your limitation. And a nice part of the matrix I like to look at was the spoon. And that little, was written for that young little boy to say. But when Neo went to him and, he was saying, can you bend the spoon? There was something perceptive saying that it was the spoon that was bending, it was your mind that was bending. And that's the important thing, that we have a lot more control than we know that we have. And a big part of the red pill is, the blue pill is the comfortable pill. And the comfortable pill is to sing "We Shall Overcome," and for the next 100 years, blame slavery for our problems, blame Jim Crow, blame segregation, all of that stuff. That's easy. You don't have to do anything to do that. Like, that's the easiest thing you can ever do in your life. But if you swallow that red pill, you say, I can do it. I can go over any barrier. I can get what I want. Now, you're not going to become Robert F. Smith. You're not going to become Jay-Z. You're not going to become Oprah. You could, but it's unlikely. But what you can become is a good plumber, a good electrician. Like me, you could become a good finance guy. You could become a stockbroker. Well, although stockbrokers the algos have taken over from stockbroking. I wouldn't advise that. But there's always investment banking. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. But in order for you to try to challenge these things, you have to challenge the status quo. And you have to understand that within the black community, the status quo, sorry to say, I'm so sad as a black man to say, is victimhood. And once we escape that, we have taken the real red pill for black people, which is you can overcome. And there's a natural tendency to say immigrants, they are against black people. They think they're better than American blacks or natural Canadian blacks. But what you need to understand is the folks that come over, a lot of them are from the upper middle class. They're educated. They're all of that. They are red pilled. They go in there and they go work for the biggest companies. They get good salaries. They work hard, and a lot of things that they have learned, has helped them. Like, one of the things is, always want to tell people about this story. When I started working in auditing, I wanted to go out on a field assignment. I just had started. It was about 3 weeks in, and I went to my group leader and I said, hey, I've not been assigned. Some of those folks that I was in training have been assigned already. And he said to me, hey, listen, I don't have any assignment to send you on. So, you got to sit there. But I just moved into his office because he just got promoted. And he said, could you help me pack out some stuff? And I was like, hey, I'll help you pack it out. And I packed out the stuff with him. It was about an hour. And then when I left, he said, thank you. And I went and I sat back at my desk. And within an hour, I got an email that I was going to be sent on an assignment. And it's now that I can look at it several years, well over a decade later, and I can see what he was doing. He was seeing if I was the corporate guy And you have to understand what the corporate guy is. The corporate guy is a guy that will support the company. He's a guy that he will put the company before himself, before his pride and all that stuff. And he wanted to know that I was there, because no matter how smart you are, you cannot be a part of a team if you're not a team player. And a lot of times the team is above you. And, that's why a lot of guys who play, professional, well, I'll say, organized sports in school, they're ahead, and those who are in the military, because they understand that the success of the team is more important than success of the individual. Big lesson, fantastic lesson. It works in the corporate world also. But I was red pilled. I did not think of him as being against me or belittling me. I saw that he was testing me. Something that, unless you're red pilled, you don't understand. You have to look at the greater good. Like, I remember relating to my father. It's like, hey, you got your degree, you got all of this stuff, and this guy has you moving boxes. But I saw it as, hey, this was an opportunity for me to show myself, to not be filled with pride, not to be filled with hubris, being willing to be humble, so that he understood that I was a team player. And that worked well for me, and I like it. And so what I'm saying to a lot of folks is, let's try to understand the red pill in the context of being black. And it's special. It's very special in that context, because while a young man who may be white, his parents red pilled him on going for the professions, going for the skill trades, going for all of that. So he's not worried about that. The red pill movement does not really affect him on that. He may be considered more about getting into the gym, maybe he's a little overweight, pumping muscle, pumping irons and building muscles. And then he's more concerned with being confident around girls, because, maybe he's socially awkward and all of that stuff. I don't think that's there's a sector that's not their problem. I think for blacks, a lot of black young men, the problem is breaking the chains, the mental chains of slavery, of oppression, and going out there to achieve. And it's very hard. I will accept that it's very hard for anyone living in the hood to do this. That's difficult. It's extremely difficult, because once you live in the hood, you live around a people that have a common idea, a common set of mores, I call them, or what's called. And it's hard to break that into that successful set of mores, which is probably a few miles down the people practice that. So that's something I want us to think about, because this red pill is so important for us to break out of those mental chains and become those people that want to level up, want to improve themselves, want to get a skill. Because just think of it, a guy driving a forklift, a guy who is in construction, a guy driving a tractor, all of that stuff. Those are the guys who seem to get paid very well. And we need to focus that ourselves in getting into professions, getting into skilled trades. That's our red pill. And then, as we said, all the other things come. Now you have a better credit score. You're able to probably get a mortgage for a house. And now you're more attractive on the dating market. Now, probably that's not the big problem for a lot of folks. But listen, living with a woman and not having any, a solid income, that relationship will be in shambles, right? So something for us to think about as we go along here. I want to do more of this on the red pill, because I think for us as black people, we have to think of the red pill in a different manner. We have to think about it. I always go back to what Bob Marley sung. I always go back to what Marcus Garvey wrote. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. And that's very important. We have to free our minds. And when our minds are free, we can achieve what anyone can achieve, right? I go back to Robert F. Smith. If he can achieve it, I can achieve it. I mean, maybe the only intangibles are, is my IQ, is my social skills as good as his? Maybe not. But that shows that it's the limiting factor is not your color. It will be your ability. And that's the important thing. So if you have the ability, you can achieve. So something for us to think about. I'll do more on this as we go on with this series. Thank you guys. And again, listen, we want to do more of these videos, and the reason why I'm doing this, I want us as black men, and I hope I can reach to younger men, to start to think, when you're in high school, Start to think, how am I going to get a trade? How am I going to get income? How am I going to save for the future? How am I going to invest and start investing, with small amounts, so that when I get to my age in the mid 40s, I look back and I'm happy at the steps that I took, right? So that's really the purpose for this. Like, I don't need this YouTube channel to make money from, because I already have a career. I'm taking these 2 weeks off, and I want to make some content, and I want to share my experience with you, because I think that we can, as black men, like, we can advance ourselves. We can. And it's something I am a cheerleader for a lot of people, and I hope that somehow we can reach the right people in getting this message to them. You can be the next Robert Smith, and you don't have to be. If you are even 1,000th of Robert Smith, you're worth $5 million. Just think about that. Thank you, guys. Until the next time.